Hi guys, it's Greg Howlett, and I'm again here with Danny Crawford. And Danny is a studio musician from the town, the booming metropolis of Liberty, South Carolina. And we were just talking before this about the fact there's no recording studios in Liberty, which he keeps saying Liberty is sort of like Mulberry, right? Mayberry.
Yeah,
Mayberry.
Yeah.
I'm not up on my Andy Griffith trivia as I should be. Um, but it's a small town in South Carolina, sort of like where I live. And you find yourself traveling to do these sessions either here in Atlanta or where else?
I travel up a lot around Charlotte and Asheville. There's Crossroads Music, and work also out around Chattanooga, Knoxville. So, and then a few places in Alabama. So it's about a 5-state area that I'm
Okay.
in and out of.
So we're going to talk about in this segment, we're going to talk about sort of the big picture process of producing. And in the last two segments, we'll go into some more specific stuff, technical stuff. But let's talk about the big picture. First of all, how I guess you would tell me if I asked you how you get your work, it's because reputation, word of mouth, doing this for a long time, right?
Pretty much, yeah.
But also you have a relationship with Crossroads, right, that you do a lot with them, which, if I'm not wrong, they do a ton of, well, a lot of genres now, right?
Mm-hmm.
But Southern gospel is sort of their big thing, but they're now into a lot of.
Yeah, they do some bluegrass and some what would be called Americana, and also looking at some contemporary artists.
Okay. So here's what I want to actually talk about in this segment. I'd sort of like to walk through the process. Okay, so for those of you that are listening, just to give you the perspective, you have somebody out there that decides they're going to record a project, and sometimes it could be just sometimes they're called vanity projects or something where it's maybe somebody doing this for themselves that doesn't necessarily want to travel and be a professional musician. So you have everything from that up to the big groups. The bigger groups that you hear a lot on radio, but they all start with songs, and I would suspect that never do you ever see the songs written out, right?
No,
Almost never.
never.
You may get lyrics, but you have to somehow get from that stage to finished tracks. Tell us about the process of doing that.
In most instances, the group will send me the 10 songs that they're planning to record. Usually will be on a CD or MP3s or whatever, and I sit and I'll listen through it. And normally the demos they send me will have a voice and an instrument of some type, whether it be just guitar or piano. Sometimes they'll send me a complete recording. They're maybe going to record someone else's song that's maybe popular, but basically it's the keyboard player's job to write the charts for the session.
That's what do you call that? Just an informal rule.
Yeah, if you're in Nashville, you're considered the session leader.
Okay.
When you do that, but in gospel, it's generally the keyboard player, and so I'll sit and I go through the 10 songs, writing an actual number chart for all the players on the session, and each player, whether it be the drummer, the guitar player, they know how to look at those numbers and know how that applies to their instrument. But it takes it's usually anywhere from 2 to 4 hours to write the charts.
Okay, but you do that by listening, and as fast as you're listening, you're writing numbers.
Exactly.
Maybe you brought some charts with you.
This would be a very basic. As you can see, it's mostly 1, 5, 4. There's a few 6 minors. But generally, that's your basics. Occasionally, you'll have something.
Did you just hit the keys, or did it play itself?
I think it just played.
Right.
No, I hit it. You'll see some where you start getting into fraction chords, which I can explain that. That starts getting a little deeper, and then you can see here you're starting to. This is delving into more than just 1, 4, 5, but everything on the page has significance. And
Just are you able to? Can you hear? No matter how sophisticated the chord, do you get it the first time you write it, or do you have to go back and listen sometimes?
I have to go back. I hardly ever attempt doing it unless I'm sitting at the keyboard, because invariably there's something that maybe you think is maybe a ninth chord or something, and
Yeah.
just for safety, I always keep my keyboard.
But even so, you're still doing this really quickly, right? It said 2 to 4 hours, so that would be 10 minutes a song.
Yeah, and some things that are really involved with a lot of orchestral accompaniment and really complex chords, those can get into 20 and 30 minutes easy per song. Oddly enough, sometimes some of the more contemporary stuff is a little harder to write out, even though it's simple chord wise. Sometimes there'll be the way the timing is laid out, especially if it's written from a guitar player's perspective. They'll often do what's called push beats or
Sure.
dotted quarter stuff, and sometimes you have to just write all of those notations out for everybody to know what's going on. And it's not that what you're doing is hard; it just takes time.
Sure. So you would do before the session. Again, the session from the last segment, we talked about the fact that a typical project, one day, 10 hours in the studio, approximately. So you walk in there, and before you get there, you've gone through, you've listened to everything, and you have generated. I guess y'all can see that, but that is a typical chart. We call this a Nashville chart or Nashville numbery chart. Similar, it's similar. I've written about this before. It's similar to the charts you would see even in classical music or jazz, except sometimes you see Roman numerals instead of Arabic numerals, but sort of the same thing. And we're going to talk about that a little more in the next segment. But once you get the chart written, okay, so now we're in the studio. Let's say that you have a bass player, a drummer, and maybe another utility player, and somebody singing scratch vocals. So now you got to scratch vocals means well, I'm using these terms. Scratch vocals would mean a vocal that is not really a keeper. It's just to keep y'all in line.
Just a reference.
Yeah, a reference. So how do you actually go from a chart, which is just a set of numbers, to a full track?
Usually when you're dealing with session players, when you walk into the room with those guys, it's like the musical bar is already at a certain level as to where they hear music. And so they'll listen to that demo, whether it be a fully produced demo that they're hearing, or if it's just a guy sitting there with his guitar. They listen to it with their instrument in mind. You know, they're thinking, okay, what do I hear the guitar doing in this? Or there is no guitar, so what do I hear myself needing to do? And with the way those guys hear it, a lot of times there's not even a rehearsal of the song involved. We gather around the piano. I play the demo. They're reading the chart as it goes down. When it's over, we'll talk about it and discuss any questions or if the artist needs to make any changes. And a lot of times, the drummer will just go get the tempo and he'll say, "Turn the light on. Let's do this."
It's magic.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But if it's something a little more challenging, or it needs to be, if there are areas that need to be worked out, we'll take a few minutes and run through it. But by and large, you know, as these guys are listening to it, they're hearing it with finished product in mind, and know where to go with that.
How many takes does it normally take before you start doing fixes? A take would be a run through the song. You might do a couple of takes to where it feels good enough for you to start fixing, right? What fixing would mean you don't record the song, you just record little places that might need to be fixed.
Yeah.
So how many takes?
Average probably 2. A lot of times we'll just do it with one.
One take.
You know,
okay.
With certain players, man, they'll just nail it right off. But almost all the time, somebody will have to go back and repair a verse.
Sorry, got the phone problem here. It's my daughter. It's not that I didn't answer the call from my daughter. She quit. It stopped right at the station. But it's my daughter. But okay, so we do 2 takes on average, and then after you do 2 takes, I've heard this enough. Somebody will say I need measures, or y'all call it bars, of course. I need bar 52 again, and then you start doing fixes. And of course, in the studio, how do you talk about the punching process?
Okay. As a song's going down, if I make a mistake, say in the second verse, and then maybe another one at the end of the bridge, I try to make mental notes as I'm playing of, okay, remember where that happened. So at the end of the song, I can tell the guy that's engineering, back up to second line of the verse, bar 6. And usually your engineers are very efficient to where they're reading and know what you're talking about. And so when it gets to the measure where my mistake happened, the guy just on his computer, he just hits enter usually, or clicks with his mouse, and it engages the recorder. You play and fix your mistake, and then he clicks that same button and it punches you out.
Right. So you're playing. This is still probably complex, but you're playing along, and you're in the groove. But when it comes to that point, you're still playing. Even if you may not even know that he does it, though you probably do, based on what you hear in your headphones. But he'll punch a button, and all of a sudden, that little segment that was previously recorded is going to be erased and re-recorded. And then when he punches again, now you're going to go back to what was originally recorded. So you're just replacing a small part. And very efficient. So in other words, you take a couple takes, and then 30 minutes fixes, and you can do a song.
And that enables you to play a little bit outside of your comfort zone. You can go for something a little more aggressive, or stretch yourself to try to play a little more complicated lick or feel, because you do have the comfort of knowing, okay, if I mess it up, I'm not messing up the whole song. I can come back to just this spot and fix it. So,
I noticed, I was over there a couple weeks ago, I was watching, and I noticed that y'all weren't isolated. I don't think. Some of y'all were in the same room. Is that typical for you?
That day, the drums were out in the open room, and I was having to record, as he recorded drums, even though the piano was sitting right beside him. I never recorded drums or piano at the same time he was doing drums. While he would do drums, I would go down with an electric piano or something that was running direct into the console rather than a live mic.
Okay.
But the guitar player was in an isolated room, so.
Okay. And the reason that's important is isolation keeps you. If one person messes up, the other two, their work is preserved. If everybody's in the same room, one person messes up, that mess up may be in everybody's mics, which means everybody has to re-record. So I didn't notice that's what y'all were doing. So y'all didn't record at the same time. Anything else about the process of you might think that the average person might be interested, not know, but might be interested in knowing?
Yesterday I was working with a group, and at the end of the day, one of the girls made the comment that was the first time she had ever been into a recording session, and she was a really good singer. And she said, I never realized when I'm listening to a song on the radio or on CD that this is what goes into it. You just kind of figure that everybody walks into the room and plays everything at one time, where she was seeing it being built almost instrument by instrument. We would lay down the basic piano, bass, and drums, and then you would add, and by the time it's finished, there's maybe 8 or 10 or more instruments.
Sure.
But it's just 3 or 4 guys that have done it all. And when people start hearing themselves on tape singing, and then they realize, okay, there's really a lot to this that needs correcting, and it's an eye opener for a lot of people.
Yes, pitch correction is your friend. All right, well, we'll leave it at that. In the next 2 segments, we're going to talk more technically, and we'll get into some technical details of all this, at which point some of y'all will start snoozing. But some of y'all will really be into this, and it should be helpful, so I'll see you then.